The heist was already happening before you noticed. For 1 second, even the squirrel seems to measure the swing. The clue was not in the feeder, it was behind it. A feeder raid can look sudden, but the yard was being read all morning. At first, the feeder looks ordinary. The squirrel is not rushing, it is watching. To us, it is a bird feeder. To the squirrel, it is a moving lock. The open lawn is faster, but not safer, so it follows the edge, where the yard gives it cover. Then the back door changes the whole calculation. Waiting is part of the route. When the porch quiets, the map opens again. The birds return first, and that matters. Every landing teaches something about the swing. Before the leap, there is a test. A bad route is still useful information. The safest path is not always the one closest to the food. From the fence line, the feeder is a gap, a swing, and a landing problem. The feeder waits in the middle, visible from every route. Even the ground under the feeder tells a story. A good target also needs a good exit. Different squirrels may use different styles, but the map still matters. A tail flick can mark a change in the yard. The person inside barely moves. The squirrel still counts it. When the window goes still, the squirrel moves again. Even wind can delay a small heist. The squirrel waits for the feeder to stop fighting the air. Distance, swing, and grip all meet in one small moment. The fence is not just a fence. It is a highway with memory. Familiar wood lets the squirrel move without guessing. But one new object can slow the whole plan. The squirrel does not need to understand the glove. It only needs to avoid surprise. That detour costs a few seconds, so the yard goes quiet again. The target slowly stops moving. Now the squirrel chooses the stronger edge. The leap is close, but not automatic. One last movement crosses the yard, then everything lines up. What looked sudden was the end of a long calculation. The first win is not the seed, it is the grip. Then the tail becomes a balancing tool. But getting on the feeder is not the same as opening it. The small opening made for birds becomes the next clue. A few seeds fall before the squirrel eats any. Below, the quiet ground changes first. The birds know the feeder has changed too. The feeder gives food, but it also gives trouble. The clever move is knowing when to let go. By the time you look, the squirrel may already be gone. The human sees the ending, not the setup. The clues are small, but they are still there. Rewind the yard, and the path becomes visible. Squirrels do not just jump toward food, they adjust to surfaces. A branch, a fence, and a feeder all move differently. A heavier squirrel may change the feeder even more. The gray squirrel's route fits its own body. A knot in the fence can become a tiny landmark. The yard is remembered in points, edges, and cover. But the map changes whenever the yard changes. A new shadow is enough to make it pause. It tests the changed place with one paw first. Once the new piece is checked, the old route returns. From the ground, the feeder still looks out of reach. Fallen seed is easy, but it is not the whole prize. The next attempt begins before the feeder stops moving completely. Sometimes the route is not the feeder. It is what holds the feeder. Metal is smooth, so the squirrel checks before trusting it. The failed path sends it back to the proven one. Now the same leap carries more information. This time, the feeder is almost perfectly still. Less swing means more control. Once balanced, the squirrel wastes almost no movement. The payoff is small, but quick. Even during the reward, the yard is still being watched. It may only be a curtain moving, but the squirrel checks. The squirrel has enough. The exit matters now. It disappears into the safest green place. What remains is a swinging feeder and a changed ground. A few minutes later, the yard acts normal again. But leaving the feeder does not always mean leaving the yard. After a raid, the feeder teaches again. A squirrel raid often has 4 silent stages. Your feeder may have its own version of the same map. Look for the worn place before you blame the last second. Then look for the hidden waiting place. The quiet routine around the feeder becomes part of the schedule. Back in this yard, the feeder has gone still again. The squirrel returns to the same old marker, but the target is not exactly the same now. A small tilt is enough to change the next move. Instead of rushing, it tests from the edge. The feeder answers by swinging sideways. Not every chance is worth taking. Sometimes the fastest raid begins with doing nothing. The speed you notice is only the visible part. If you look afterward, the yard may point back to the route. The launch point was hiding in plain sight. The answer is not to see the squirrel as a villain. Watch the route, the pause, the test, and the exit. Late in the day, the feeder looks innocent again. Then the watcher returns to the edge of the map. From here, the whole backyard is still a set of choices. Watch, wait, test, leap, leave. The feeder was never just hanging there. When you notice the clues, the yard feels more alive. The squirrel measures the feeder one more time. Tomorrow, the same yard may become a new puzzle. The locked box hangs still, but the route is not forgotten. Has a squirrel ever beaten every feeder trick you tried? The next time a feeder swings, look for what moved before it, and look for the place where nothing seems to be happening. From cover, the feeder is not far. It is timed. The route is never just one line. It is a wild neighbor reading a familiar place, and the feeder is the little mystery that lets us see it. Then it slips away, leaving only the map behind. The yard looks ordinary again, unless you know where to look. Maybe your feeder has its own hidden route waiting nearby. Has a squirrel ever beaten every feeder trick you tried?